She sat quiet in row 8, no one noticed her. Then both engines failed at 30,000 feet. The pilots had no power, no hope. But fighter jets flying beside them asked one strange question over the radio: "What is your call sign?" Her answer shocked everyone in the sky. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. It was a normal Tuesday morning at Denver International Airport. The sky was clear and blue. Flight 522 was getting ready to leave for Chicago. It was a full flight, with 160 passengers on board. Captain Robert Hayes had been flying for 28 years. His co-pilot, First Officer Daniel Cruz, had joined the airline only 2 years ago, but he was sharp and careful. Everything about the morning looked normal. The weather was good. The plane had passed all checks. Nothing seemed different from any other day. Among the passengers boarding the plane was a woman named Sarah Miller. She was 39 years old. She wore a plain gray jacket and simple black pants. She carried a small bag and walked straight to her seat, seat 8C, without looking at anyone. She did not talk to the flight attendants. She did not smile at the man sitting next to her. She just sat down quietly, pulled out a small notebook, and started reading it. Nobody around her thought anything special about her. She looked like any tired office worker going home after a business trip. Nobody knew that she used to fly fighter jets for the United States Navy. The plane took off at exactly 8 in the morning. The climb was smooth. Passengers relaxed. Some slept, some read books, some watched movies on their phones. Sarah looked out of the window at the clouds below. Her face was calm, but her eyes moved carefully, the way a trained pilot's eyes always move, checking things without even trying. She noticed the wing lights blinking normally. She noticed the smooth sound of the engines. Everything felt fine to her, just like it felt fine to everyone else on the plane. At around 9,000 meters, something changed. The plane suddenly shook hard, like it had hit a wall of wind. Passengers gasped. Cups fell from the drink carts. A flight attendant lost her balance for a second before holding onto a seat. In the cockpit, Captain Hayes felt the aircraft shudder. Warning lights began flashing on the control panel. The right engine, engine number 2, was losing power fast. Within seconds, it made a loud grinding noise and then went completely silent. "Engine 2 has failed," First Officer Cruz said, his voice tight. Captain Hayes tried to stay calm. One engine failure was serious, but planes could still fly and land safely with only one engine. He began running the emergency checklist. But then, only a few seconds later, the left engine also started losing power. The plane shook again, harder this time. The engine sound became weak, then stopped completely. "Both engines are out," Cruz said, his hands shaking slightly as he checked the instruments again to be sure. "Captain, we have no power." The cockpit went quiet except for the sound of wind rushing past the plane. The aircraft was now gliding, with no engine power at all, 30,000 feet above the ground. Captain Hayes grabbed the radio and called air traffic control. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Flight 522. We have lost both engines. We are gliding. 163 souls on board." The controller on the ground answered quickly, telling them the nearest airport was over 70 miles away. Captain Hayes looked at his instruments and did quick math in his head. He knew the numbers did not look good. The plane would not have enough height to glide all the way to that airport. He needed another plan, but there was no clear one in sight. Inside the cabin, passengers began to panic. Some cried. Some called their families on their phones. Children were scared and confused. The flight attendants tried their best to keep people calm, but their own faces showed fear too. The plane was slowly losing height, and everyone could feel the nose tilting slightly down. In seat 8C, Sarah Miller sat very still. Her calm expression had not changed. But inside her mind, years of training were waking up. She had spent 12 years flying F-18 fighter jets for the Navy before she left the service. She had trained for engine failures many times, in simulators and in real emergencies over the ocean. She knew about glide ratios. She knew about using wind and air currents to save fuel and height. She opened her small notebook and, without saying a word to the man beside her, began writing quick numbers and lines, the same way she used to do before difficult training flights. A flight attendant named Rachel walked past row 8, trying to check on passengers. She noticed Sarah writing calmly while everyone else around her was shaking with fear. It looked strange. Rachel stopped and asked, "Ma'am, are you all right?" Sarah looked up. "I need to speak to the pilots. Right now. It's important." Rachel almost said no, because passengers are never allowed near the cockpit during a flight, especially during an emergency. But something about the calm and firm way Sarah spoke made her pause. She looked into Sarah's eyes and saw no fear there, only focus. Rachel nodded and led her quickly to the front of the plane, then knocked the special code on the cockpit door. Captain Hayes turned around, surprised and even a little annoyed to see a passenger standing there during an emergency. "We don't have time for this," he said sharply. "I flew F-18 fighter jets for 12 years, Sarah said quickly. "I have handled dual-engine failures in training. I might be able to help you find more distance. Please, just give me 60 seconds. Cruz looked at the captain, unsure. But Hayes remembered something important: in an emergency, pride does not matter, only survival does. "Talk fast," he said. Sarah stepped closer and looked at the instrument panel. Her eyes moved quickly over altitude, speed, and direction, just like old habits returning after many years. "Your glide speed is a little too fast. You are losing height quicker than needed. Slow down to your best glide speed, and turn 10 degrees to your right. There is a long, flat valley in that direction with wind blowing from the west. It won't give you lift, but it will reduce your fall." "How do you know that?" Cruz asked. "I flew missions over land like this. Trust me on the numbers," Sarah said firmly. Captain Hayes looked at her for only 2 seconds before deciding. He adjusted the plane's pitch slightly, slowing it to the speed Sarah suggested, and turned right as she said. Almost immediately, the rate of descent became a little slower and steadier. It was not a huge change, but every second counted now. While this was happening, 2 Air Force fighter jets had been sent to check on the passenger plane, since any large aircraft with an emergency near restricted airspace gets an escort. The fighter pilots flew close to Flight 522, watching it glide silently through the sky. One of the pilots, a man with the call sign Falcon, spoke over the radio to Captain Hayes. "Flight 522, this is Falcon. We see you gliding steady. That's unusual for a plane with no power. Who is flying with you up there?" Captain Hayes answered honestly. "We have a passenger helping us. Former Navy pilot." There was a short pause on the radio. Then Falcon asked, "Ma'am, can you confirm your call sign?" Sarah leaned toward the radio and answered simply. "Raven." Another pause, longer this time. Then a different, excited voice came on the radio. "Raven? Is that Sarah Miller? I trained under you at Fallon. You taught me low-altitude recovery. I can't believe this." Sarah gave a small, tired smile. "Small world. Less talking, more flying, okay?" The fighter pilot stayed close, guiding the passenger plane with updates about wind and distance, while Sarah kept helping Captain Hayes and Cruz manage speed and direction. The valley below came into view, long and open, with a small regional airport at its far end that had a runway just long enough for an emergency landing. It was not the big Chicago airport they had planned for, but it was their only real chance now. "Gear down at 1,000 feet, Sarah said calmly. "Not before. You need to save every bit of height you can." Cruz followed her instructions exactly. The final minutes felt like hours. The ground came closer and closer. The runway, cracked and old, but strong, appeared straight ahead. At the very last moment, Captain Hayes pulled back gently on the controls, and the plane touched down hard but steady, bouncing once before the wheels gripped the runway fully. The brakes screamed as the plane slowed down, using almost the entire length of the runway before finally coming to a stop, just short of the grass at the end. For a moment, there was total silence. Then the cabin filled with sounds of crying, laughing, and clapping all at once. Passengers hugged each other. Some prayed. Captain Hayes closed his eyes and took a deep breath, hands still shaking slightly on the controls. He turned to Sarah. "You just saved everyone on this plane." Sarah shook her head slowly. "We saved them. Together." News of the emergency landing spread fast. Reporters wanted to know everything about the quiet woman from Seat 8C who had walked into the cockpit and helped land a powerless plane. At a small press event later that week, Sarah spoke simply about what happened. She explained that she had left the Navy years earlier to spend more time with her family, and had not flown any aircraft since. She said she never expected her old training to matter again, but on that day, it saved 163 lives, including her own. Captain Hayes and First Officer Cruz both said the same thing in interviews. Without Sarah's calm advice and clear instructions, the plane would not have reached any runway at all. The airline later offered Sarah a role helping train pilots for emergency situations, and she accepted, saying she wanted her years of experience to help protect more people in the future. Falcon, the fighter pilot who had once trained under her, visited Sarah a few weeks later. "I always wondered what happened to Raven after you left the service," he said. "Now the whole country knows." Sarah smiled quietly. "I was just a quiet woman in row 8. Anyone could have been sitting there." "No," Falcon said. "Not anyone could have done what you did. Only you could." And from that day on, whenever people spoke about Flight 522, they always remembered one simple thing: sometimes the calmest person in the room is also the strongest, and sometimes true heroes sit quietly in row 8, waiting for the moment they are needed most.